Lydia had always believed in the sanctity of marriage. For 15 years, she had dedicated herself to her husband, Steve, and their 2 children, pouring every ounce of her energy into their home. She had sacrificed her dreams, her sleep, her very identity to build a life where they could all feel safe and loved. Their mortgage, their shared responsibilities, at least what she had assumed were shared, had been the foundation of their life together. She had believed that love was about patience, about endurance, about choosing each other every single day. But one evening, a single overheard conversation shattered the illusion she had been living under. It was late, and she had just stepped outside to bring in the laundry when she heard voices drifting from the neighbor's garden. At first, she barely paid attention, her mind still preoccupied with the never-ending to-do list running in her head. But then she recognized Steve's deep tone, a voice she had once found so comforting, so familiar. And then came the laughter. Soft, teasing, intimate. The sound froze her in place, her hands tightening around the laundry basket. She knew that laugh. Claire, the neighbor's 24-year-old daughter. Something inside Lydia's stomach twisted painfully, a primal instinct warning her that she was about to hear something she could never unhear. "She's always so busy with the kids and the house," Claire whispered, her voice dripping with amusement. "She doesn't even look like a woman anymore." Lydia's breath caught in her throat. The words sliced through her like a blade, each syllable a brutal disregard of her sacrifices, of the very essence of who she had become. The weight of exhaustion, of years spent putting everyone else first, pressed down on her like a suffocating force. "I know," Steve replied, his voice carrying a sigh so casual, so indifferent, it felt like a death sentence to everything they had built together. "She's just there. I don't think she even sees me anymore." Claire let out a breathy chuckle. "Well, I see you." Lydia's world tilted. Her heart pounded so hard she feared they might hear it from across the fence. The betrayal seeped into her bones, cold and unrelenting. She had expected devotion. She had earned respect. And yet here he was, dismissing her existence as if she were nothing more than background noise in his life. He spoke of her as though she were an old, worn-out sweater he no longer had use for. And Claire, young, thoughtless, cruel, was offering herself as the new replacement, like she was doing him some grand favor. Lydia could have stormed in, let rage take over, let heartbreak spill from her lips in a torrent of fury. She could have screamed, thrown something, demanded answers, demanded dignity. But no. That would be too easy for them. A confrontation would only give them an opportunity to lie, to twist the truth, to paint her as the hysterical, neglected wife who had driven him into another woman's arms. No. That wasn't how this was going to play out. If Steve thought she was invisible, then she would make herself seen, by everyone. And when she was finished, they would never forget it. Over the next week, Lydia moved through her daily routine with a practiced ease, as if nothing had changed. She cooked Steve's favorite meals, packed the children's lunches, helped them with their homework, and kissed her husband goodbye every morning with the same gentle smile he had come to expect. But beneath that calm exterior, her mind was a whirlwind of calculations, planning every detail for the night she would never let him forget. She reached out to her neighbors, carefully selecting those who had known their family for years. Then, with careful precision, she called Claire's parents. "It's been too long since we all sat down together," she said warmly, her voice laced with sincerity. "I'd love to catch up." Claire's mother hesitated at first, but Lydia persisted. "It's just dinner. Nothing serious. I thought it would be nice." After securing their attendance, she turned her attention to Steve's parents. She played the role of the devoted wife flawlessly. "It's been ages since we had a real family dinner," she said, her voice light and cheerful. "The kids would love to see you." Steve's mother was delighted, and his father, though less enthusiastic, agreed with little resistance. One by one, the pieces fell into place. Finally, she turned to Claire. She stood outside the woman's workplace, waiting for her to step out at the end of her shift. When Claire finally emerged, Lydia approached her with the grace of a queen. "I wanted to invite you and your parents over for dinner this weekend," Lydia said, her voice steady, almost casual. "I thought it would be nice to catch up." Claire stiffened. "Lydia, I don't think." "I insist," Lydia cut in smoothly, her eyes unwavering. "You owe me at least that." If you are enjoying this story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue. The unspoken weight of her words settled between them like a physical force. Claire swallowed hard and nodded. The night of the dinner arrived, and Lydia had never felt so in control. The table was set with the finest china, candles flickering gently in the center. The aroma of roasted meat and seasoned vegetables filled the house, warm and inviting. The children, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface, laughed and played in the living room. Then, one by one, the guests arrived. Claire and her parents were the first, stepping inside hesitantly. Steve's parents followed soon after, exchanging pleasantries with forced smiles. And finally, Steve himself walked in, his expression shifting slightly when he saw the gathering before him. Lydia smiled, a picture of warmth and hospitality. She pulled out a chair for Claire, gesturing for her to sit. Steve hesitated, glancing between his wife and his mistress, but Lydia gave him no room to refuse. As they all took their seats, Lydia picked up her wine glass and raised it high. "To family," she said, her voice smooth and unwavering. "And to truth." A tense silence followed, stretching unbearably as she let the weight of her words sink in. Then, with the elegance of a seasoned performer, she placed an envelope in the center of the table, right between Steve and Claire. The air crackled with anticipation. Steve's face paled. Claire's hands trembled. The envelope sat untouched, a time bomb waiting to be opened. Lydia leaned back in her chair, her smile unwavering. "Shall we eat?" she asked sweetly, savoring the moment before the world crumbled around them. After dinner, Lydia stood at the head of the table, tapping her wine glass lightly with her fingernail. The faint chimes silenced the murmurs, drawing every eye toward her. She took a slow breath, exuding a calm that belied the storm raging inside her. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice carrying an edge that made Steve shift in his chair. "As you probably guessed, I have something to share." She reached beneath her chair and pulled out a thick stack of papers, dropping them onto the table with a resounding thud. "I've been thinking a lot lately about our household, about how things run, who does what, and what makes this family function. And I realized something." Her gaze locked onto Steve, dark and unreadable. "I do everything." A murmur rippled through the room. Steve's jaw tightened as he forced a strained chuckle. "Lydia, what are you talking about?" She held up the papers. "This is a list of every responsibility I handle in this house. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, school runs, doctor appointments, budgeting, meal planning, holiday arrangements, you name it, I do it. And you?" She slid a single blank sheet of paper across the table to him. "Nothing." Steve's mother gasped, her hands flying to her chest. "Lydia, surely that's not true." Lydia smiled politely. "Oh, but it is." She straightened, her posture regal. "And since we have guests, let's make this interactive." Her eyes flicked to Claire, who had been sitting rigidly, barely daring to breathe. "Claire, did you know Steve thinks I don't look like a woman anymore?" The blood drained from Claire's face. What?" Lydia nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "Oh, don't be shy. I overheard you both last week, right outside in the garden." A heavy silence settled over the room like an oppressive fog. Steve's father, a man who had always prided himself on loyalty and respect in marriage, leaned forward, his stare piercing through his son. "Tell me that's not true, Steve." Steve opened his mouth, but no words came. His fingers tightened around the stem of his wine glass until his knuckles turned white. Lydia continued, her voice smooth, unwavering. "I may have been too busy raising our children and keeping our home running to look like a woman in your eyes, Steve, but I assure you, I am very much a woman. A woman who has spent 15 years supporting a man who does not deserve her." Claire's mother turned to her daughter, horror-stricken. "Claire, what have you done?" Claire stammered, It wasn't like that. We were just talking." If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue. "Oh, I heard exactly what it was like," Lydia said, her smile thin, sharp as a blade. "And I thought it would be fitting for everyone to hear it too." Steve's mother shook her head in disbelief. "Steve, how could you?" Lydia exhaled deeply, as though releasing a weight she had carried for too long. "Steve, you have humiliated me. You have taken everything I have given you and dismissed it as though it were nothing. But tonight, I take back my power." She turned to their children, their wide, innocent eyes darting between their mother and father, trying to make sense of what was happening. "You two are the only reason I stayed as long as I did. But I refuse to let you grow up thinking this is what love looks like." With measured grace, she placed the neatly folded white envelope in front of Steve. "Divorce papers. I've already signed them." A stunned silence engulfed the room. Claire's father sat back, his jaw clenched in barely restrained disgust. Steve's mother wiped away silent tears, her heart breaking for the family unraveling before her. The children stared at their father, searching his face for any sign of remorse, but finding none. Lydia lifted her glass, her hands steady, her expression unreadable. "To new beginnings." She drank, savoring the taste of freedom, while Steve sat motionless, the weight of his choices crushing down on him. Claire looked as if she wanted to disappear into the walls. And for the first time in 15 years, Lydia felt truly seen. And she liked it. Steve suddenly jolted forward, his chair scraping against the floor as he reached desperately for Lydia's hand. His grip was trembling, his eyes pleading. "Lydia, please. I was stupid. I was selfish. I've taken you for granted, but I don't want to lose you. I'll go to counseling. I'll change. Just don't do this." The room held its breath. The children, wide-eyed and tearful, clutched each other, their small bodies tense with fear. Their youngest whimpered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, Dad, please don't fight." Lydia's heart twisted painfully. She had built this life for them, sacrificed so much to hold it together. But was it salvageable? Could she stitch together the fragments of a love that had long since withered? She sighed, gently pulling her hand away. "Steve, this isn't just about that one conversation. It's about years of neglect. Of me carrying everything while you took me for granted. It's about the nights I cried alone, the days I felt invisible. Words are easy, but actions take work." Steve's face crumbled, the weight of his mistakes crushing him. "Then let me prove it. Please." His voice cracked, raw with desperation. Lydia studied him for a long moment, her mind racing through every broken promise, every silent dismissal, every night she had laid beside him feeling more alone than if she had been by herself. The weight of years bore down on her. Could he truly change? Would she ever believe him if he did? She inhaled deeply, her decision forming like steel in her spine. One condition. Counseling. Full commitment. No excuses, no half measures. "And if I see even a hint of the man you've been, I'm gone." Steve nodded fervently, as if grasping onto the last lifeline she was offering him. Anything. Lydia glanced at their children, their hopeful faces tinged with fear. They had watched, listened, absorbed more than she had ever wanted them to. She would not let them grow up believing that love meant sacrifice without appreciation, that loyalty meant enduring suffering. She owed them better. She owed herself better. She exhaled, slow and deliberate. "Then let's see if you mean it." As the weeks passed, Steve threw himself into change. At first, he fumbled, uncertain, unfamiliar with the reality of everything Lydia had managed alone for years. He struggled to wake up early enough to prepare breakfast, he forgot school permission slips, and he burned dinner more times than he could count. But for the first time in his life, he saw, truly saw, the weight Lydia had carried. Providing money wasn't enough. A home wasn't built on paychecks alone, it was built on presence, effort, and care. And he had given her none of that. Slowly, he improved. He took over bedtime routines, he learned to fold laundry properly, he started listening, really listening, to Lydia, hearing her fears, her exhaustion, her dreams. The children, once wary of the tension in their home, began to trust that their father was finally there, not just physically but emotionally. He had spent years being a stranger in his own home, and now he was fighting to be more. And Lydia saw it. She remained cautious, unwilling to believe in hollow promises, but she saw the way Steve changed, not in grand declarations, but in quiet, consistent actions. He had a long way to go, and he knew it. But for the first time, he was willing to do the work. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue. As for Claire, the shame of that night clung to her like a shadow. The once close friend who had inserted herself into another woman's marriage found herself ostracized, not just by Lydia, but by those who had once respected her. Unable to bear the whispers, the judgment, she made a decision. She found a job, packed her belongings, and moved away, seeking a fresh start, away from the wreckage she had helped create. As the night ended, Steve clung to the last chance he had been given, knowing this time, he had to fight for her, not with grand gestures or empty promises, but with real change, day by day. Lydia, for the first time in years, felt like she was the one in control. Not of Steve, not of his choices, but of her own life. And whether he changed or not, she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would never lose herself again. Because love should not be a battle to be won, nor a burden to be carried alone. Love should be a partnership, where both give and both receive. And if it wasn't that, then it wasn't love at all. Thank you for watching. Did you think Lydia was right in how she addressed this with Steve? What would you have done differently? Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I will see you in the next one.